Consent. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. This is day 8 of Food Addiction Recovery Week, and I'm so happy you're here because today's guest is going to be talking about the ugly side of addiction. Not math. This is not about math at all, even though he might have been a teacher. Addiction recovery. You might know him as FatManRants. His name is Tim Kaufman, and he's had an extraordinary transformation, and he's going to tell you all about it. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you for having me, Chef AJ.
Yeah. Why do I think you were a teacher, right?
I am a teacher, yes.
Yeah, not a math teacher, though.
Well, physics. I teach engineering, so I do the math and the physics.
So you know a little bit about addition in addition to
addiction.
Okay. So we're going to make that. Well, not only do you look great, but you stayed looking great, because we've had a mixture this week, Tim, of people that struggled or have struggled with food addiction, some that have been able to toe the line and keep their weight off, and others not so much. So I'm just curious, you have remained successful. What do you think that secret is?
I don't think there is a successful. I think it's like you keep working at it. Like, you're never done. And I think that's partly what I want to talk about with my mini masterclass, I guess, on addiction is you get this thing where you're done and you can coast, and that's not so. And we also get this thing where we're the only people that struggle. And I think that's a big misconception. So to answer your question, I still struggle. I mean, I've been at this 10 years. The struggle is not as bad as it used to be because I have better tools like whole food, plant-based. It's more forgiving if you overeat, obviously, a lower calorie dense diet. But there's still that addiction thing for me. And maybe I'm just a weirdo, but I think and I think once you realize that, it's a very positive thing.
Right. Because the thing is, you can never get too cocky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, no, you're very humble about it. But sometimes people like you say, just having certain tools or systems in place really helps them.
Right. And checks and audits, right? I had a really hard curveball thrown at me these past 2 years. I have that disease, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And it's really, the healing powers of food really took a lot of my symptoms away until they didn't. I still have a genetic disease. So these past 2 years, I had a major back surgery where my spinal cord is actually on the outside of my back now. That laid me up for a long time. It was really scary. And then I had an ankle reconstruction about 3 years ago that had failed. It never took. So I almost got my foot amputated. Again, from this disease, all my bones are, so they removed 4 inches of bone. They fused my ankle, and that put me on my back too. So I had this whole thing, I went plant-based, I got super active, super fit, which was, blew the doctor's mind. Then all of a sudden, 2 years ago, I find myself hardly being able to walk again. And so the running and the exercise and the tens of thousands of calories I was burning came to a very abrupt halt, which added a whole nother layer onto this lifestyle. So.
Well, I see there's so many, these are medals, right? Over your right shoulder.
Yes, I guess you could say that's an addiction, to be honest with you. Yeah.
But imagining, because you were exercising so much, and now you're in a position where you can't exercise at all.
Well, I'm back. I just competed at Ironman Lake Placid. I just did a marathon last week, my first fused ankle marathon. So I walked it, But yeah, we can get in. And the point is, you never know what life is going to throw at you. And some of these things that you have in place for this, repetitive lifestyle, you get a curveball and you have to modify. And, a lot of times what gets you to where you are is not necessarily going to be the same thing that gets you to your next step.
Makes sense. Did you want to jump right into your presentation?
Absolutely. If I can, I have way too many monitors here. So, if I lose you in the shuffle here, I'll find you quickly. It should be that one. And then I just got to swap. I think I have this down. So if you could let me know.
It just changed. Yeah, now it's perfect.
Okay. Okay. So Chef AJ, I appreciate you inviting me to be on. I'm super honored. Every time I see you in my newsfeed on Facebook, I just I don't know how you do this. I seriously I guess we dabble in social media, and it is almost a full-time job right now for us. And I do 1/7 at most of what you do. So thank you for doing all this hard work. I know it's hard work, so I sincerely appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I couldn't do it without people like you being willing to come on the show and tell your story.
Yes. And so what I'm gonna try to do, this is my goal. I'm gonna try to just give a kind of a brief synopsis of my story, not take too much time on it. And then I guess you could say it's like a mini masterclass on the ugly side of addiction, which I kind of didn't like that title after I gave it to you, but I think we can recover from it. So I'm just going to take you back and tell you my story from when I was a kid, really. So I have had the unique opportunity to be flown all over the place and speak at all these great conferences with super rock stars like Dr. Greger and Dr. Esselstyn and Campbell. And this has been super, super cool. I've even been fortunate enough to end up in things like Good Morning America, The Today Show, WebMD, ESPN. These are all fantastic things, but the reality is I'm just a normal person. I'm just a normal. In fact, if I had willpower, I would have never let myself get to the point that I had. So I say that because one of the first interviews I ever did with a TV station, she quoted me. It was the one blurb they played on the news. I said, I'm just a fat guy that ate some apples. And I think that's really important. Sometimes I kind of go back and forth if I should pull that out of my slides, but I think it's an important thing to understand that there's nothing special about me. This lifestyle is a choice. It's literally a choice. It's out there for anyone, and anyone can do it. And the other cool thing about this is what makes my story is because it's mine, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands of stories just like mine out there. The results are not just typical, they're actually expected. So I'm going to start way, way back. I won't tell you how many years, but it's been a while. This is one of my high school pictures with my lovely high school sweetheart, who is now my wife of, oh my goodness, I'm going to get into 29 years as of last week. So we started dating when we were 14 and we are almost 50 now. So it's been a bit. And I like to show these at high school presentations because of our mullets, which kids used to think were really cool, but now, believe it or not, my students are wearing mullets. So it doesn't have the same ring that it used to. I grew up in a small town called Alden, a very rural town. It's about 20 miles east of Buffalo. And it's a farming community. And right across the street from my house was a big dairy farm. And I walked over there and I asked the farmer if I could have a job. And I started working a little bit before I was 14 years old. So the farm life became, kind of my culture. We hunted and fished and we grew all our own meat, and I milked cows twice a day before school and after school. And this was a very manual job, as you can imagine, a lot of heavy lifting. And as time went on, I thought that I was very accident prone, maybe a little klutzy, because I was always tripping and falling and kind of twisting my ankle and stuff like that. And but as time went on, I also had to get a better job because Heather and I were going to be married. So I got a job in a factory, which involved more manual labor and working above my head, which I wasn't used to. And I had this crane that I used to run that was over my head. And it seemed every time I would go up to reach that crane pendant, my shoulder would kind of pop out of the joint. And within a couple months, it got to the point where just the pressure in my chest from a good sneeze would dislocate that shoulder. So I knew something wasn't quite right. So I went to the doctor and I said I was having issues with my shoulder. They did some tests. Long story short, I had to get this surgery on my arm to kind of tighten everything up. And when the surgeon got in there, he started moving things around and he said, something is not right. Everything is very, very stretchy, almost like bubble gum. So everything the tendons and ligaments he was trying to stretch to pull together just kept stretching kind of like bubble gum. So along with a surgery that didn't work, I was also diagnosed with a genetic disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I am very fortunate with this disease because I just have the hypermobile, the elasticity kind of rendition of it. And there's many more, much more serious conditions along with this disease that have to do with heart and artery and that kind of thing. So the prognosis for me was not good. I was in my early 20s. I had been told that by the time I'm 25, I would likely end up in a wheelchair. Because I had already arthritis. My skeleton looked like the body of a 70-year-old already at 20 years old. Because every time I dislocated, every time something slipped, I would kind of nick the bone and knock some cartilage off. So it really progressed pretty fast. Obviously, this also came with some chronic pain and inflammation. Along with the prognosis that I would probably be on disability in the next few years, I also left the doctor's office with a bottle of Lortab. And I had never taken narcotics in my life. We just didn't take any medicine really growing up that I can remember. But I can remember the first time I took these, they made me feel really good. They didn't actually take the pain away, but they certainly numbed it enough that I felt very comfortable. And so, I'm going to kind of fast forward here, but as with any addiction or any narcotic, they never work as well as they did the first time. So the idea, of upping the volume of them and then ultimately the strength of them until I could no longer get, Lortabs, which that turned into Percocet and then Oxy. And I just still couldn't get enough. They would work for a little bit until they didn't. And my doctor was very well aware of the pain I was in. I had a lot of trouble at night when my body was resting, like everything kind of came out of joint. So he suggested I try a prescription called fentanyl. Now, at the time, fentanyl, no one had ever really heard of fentanyl. This was a couple decades ago, and I certainly never heard of it. But I thought, let's give it a whirl. It'll work better than the opioids that I was on. So this was a transdermal patch, which basically gave me 24 hours a day of fentanyl absorbing into my body. Along with that, we stayed on the opioids as breakthrough drugs or to stay ahead of the pain, as they say. And the fentanyl was super effective until it ran the same cycle that the other drugs had run. And at the time, without getting into too many details, there was not the computer systems that they have now. So it was pretty easy to get paper scripts and, kind of manipulate the system. But in any event, I was on a lot of opioids, still was having trouble sleeping through the night. One night, we had zero alcohol ever. I've never seen my parents drink at all. We were never into the drinking scene because we got married so young. We kind of skipped all that party stage. But I stopped home. I hadn't slept in about 4 or 5 days. And I picked up a bottle of vodka on the way home from work. And that night I took a handful of pills and I chased it down with almost an entire liter of vodka and I passed out. And unfortunately, this would become my new normal for years and years to come. And I probably could have looked you in the eye and told you I wasn't an addict while I was on all this stuff, but I certainly was very much addicted to this stuff. It was controlling my life. Along with the escapes of the drugs and alcohol, food played a huge part. And it sounds kind of weird to say this, but food almost became my choice. The other things I kind of took to feel normal after a while. You get to this point in addiction where you're not taking things to get high. You're not taking things to feel good. Then it goes to a stage where you're just taking it to feel normal. And then you hit the last stage, which is you're just taking it so you don't get sick from withdrawals. Food was different, though. Food, always seemed to hit those same dopamine spots. The best thing about food, it was everywhere and no one judged me like they would on the opioids and alcohol. It was everywhere I went. I could get it in the car. I could get it on the way home. So I started eating fast food no less than 3 times, mostly 4 times a day. I had my own pattern set up where I'd get breakfast, then lunch. I would sit in the drive-through line waiting for fast food while I was ordering pizza and wings for dinner a few hours later. So these 4 things became the center of my life, really. And I use all 4 of these things to escape reality. When really, in fact, they were building a prison. To say my life was spiraling out of control is an understatement. By the time I was 38, my kidneys were shutting down. I knew exactly what was going on. I'd wait a day or 2 till they came back online and I would just start drinking again. I weighed over 400. We don't really know how much over 400 because the doctor scale wouldn't go that high. My metabolic numbers were insane, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I can kind of share with people what it's like to weigh 400. It's super easy to understand. If you put 200 pounds on your back and try to walk upstairs, it's quite a lot of work to bend over and pick up keys, and add on to that a genetic connective tissue disorder where your joints are already destroyed. Obviously, I was having trouble, but more than the physical was the emotional. I wanted to be a good husband to my wife. I wanted to be a good dad to my kids, but I physically couldn't do most of the stuff that dads do. I mean, I can remember a basketball rolling by my feet at my daughter's basketball game. I physically could not pick the ball up to throw it back in, and it crushed me. And I think at some point, all the medicine, all the food that was supposed to be comforting this physical pain very quickly turned into emotional pain. And that's the cycle I was in. I was really heavy physically, but I was just crushed emotionally. So, everyone waits for this giant switch, and I don't think that's how kind of my transformation, if you want to call it, happened. But one of the first things that had a huge impact on my life was Heather's mom. And Heather's mom was kind of like my second mom because we were so young and grew up together. She was a great lady. She loved life, hardworking lady. She just loved life. And she had been sick with kind of like a flu kind of thing. We finally convinced her to go to the doctor, and she was diagnosed with leukemia, which flipped our world upside down. But the one thing that did, I don't think my transformation actually started with plant-based. It started with gratitude. I can remember one day walking up to the hospital to visit her right after a blood transfusion. And she was so tired, and she opened her eyes like super slow. And she's, "How's your knees?" And it just crushed me because, first of all, it tells you what kind of lady she was. But second of all, I got to go home that night from this cancer hospital, and everyone that was behind me had to stay overnight. Some of them were actually losing their legs, and my knees hurt, but at least I still had them. And at least I could go home that night. At least I didn't have chemo running through my veins. So I think the first domino to tip for me was actually finding gratitude through all this. While we're dealing with that, my father had kind of a cold thing going on. We thought he had a touch of pneumonia. He went for a checkup. They did a lung x-ray on him, and they found out that he had stage 4 kidney cancer that had metastasized through his whole body. The doctors gave him 6 months to live. My father didn't make it 6 months. He made it 6 weeks to the day of his diagnosis. My dad was my best friend in the entire world. We did everything together. He taught me everything. We hunted together. We fished together. We were best buddies. And just like that, I lost him. And that started to show me how precious life is, and how much we take for granted that we're not promised tomorrow. And Shortly after that, Heather's mom that had been diagnosed with leukemia turned into lymphoma, and ultimately a brain tumor would take her life as she lost her battle with cancer. These two things, as you can imagine, flipped our world upside down. And, after all the funerals and the planning and kind of the dust kind of settled, we tried to get back to some kind of semblance of routine in life and getting the kids back into their sports practices and whatnot. And there was nothing particular about this one morning. I still don't know what made it different than any other morning, but I came downstairs and Heather would have to put my socks and shoes on me before I'd go to work. And this one morning, she just put my sock on me. She kind of patted the side of my leg and she goes, "You're all set." And it just hit me that it wasn't going to be that long before she's going to have to go through this whole funeral planning for me. And then not only does she have to bury me, she's got to raise these two kids alone. And that really got me thinking that this picture is bigger than me. Like, my choices are affecting more than just me. So I decided to try to do something. And so I did probably the smartest thing you can do is go on YouTube and look for medical advice. And I stumbled across this bariatric thing, bariatric surgery that people were getting, and they were my size, and they would, in 1 year they'd be down to 200 pounds and running marathons, and it's like, this is what I have to do. So I called a company here in Buffalo, got all set up for it. I went into my doctor just so he could rubber stamp it and sign for the pre-op. When I got into the doctor's office, my blood pressure was 255 over 115. And I was on 2 blood pressure medicines. I was on a calcium channel blocker and a beta blocker. My heart rate was over 125 and I hadn't moved in like an hour. So he was freaking out, thought I was going to, go into a stroke right there. We negotiated a little bit and he let me just kind of relax on the examination table until I calmed down. But ultimately he denied me for the surgery. And I thought, all right, now it's not my fault, right? I'm off the hook. My doctor won't let me get this. This was my one shot. But going to bed that night, I just kept thinking about Heather's mom and my dad. And it's like, I got to do something just out of respect for them. So I started doing probably what a lot of people do. I think we call it keto now. Back then it was Atkins. I went on this Atkins thing and I did a lot of stuff wrong. I put a picture of a chair here so I remember to talk about the movement too. So my doctors had convinced me that to move as little as possible, and that was the best thing I can do for my joints to preserve them. But about a week before I got onto my chair in my office, I broke both handles off the chair and I was so embarrassed. My buddy bought me a new chair. And I decided that every time I stood up out of that chair, I'd sit back down and stand back up. That sounds ridiculous, right? But at 400 pounds, when you get up and down out of a chair twice, you're doubling your work for the day. So it was something. And even though I did everything wrong, I started recognizing that there was a connection between what I was eating and what my body was doing and how I was moving and how I felt. So I lost some weight, a pretty good amount of weight, but I still felt like crap. I was still on almost 20 prescriptions a month at this point. But sitting on my couch one night, I stumbled across this video, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. I knew nothing about it. I just knew I looked at the title and I'm like, that describes me. I watched Joe Cross go on a juice fast for 60 days. He consumed nothing but fruit and vegetable juice out of this juicer. And by the end of it, he had got rid of a bunch of disease that he had, lost a bunch of weight, felt great, super inspiring. So I ordered a juicer before the credits rolled. Now, I really didn't give it any thought about what he was putting in the juicer. I didn't really care at that point. What this did for us, though, is January 1st, which would be almost 10 years ago, I started this juice fast and I promised myself I was going to try it for 30 days. So I went to the store and bought some produce and, I came back with this little bag and I put it in my juicer, and about 2 tablespoons of juice came out. And I'm like, all right, we have to do something different here. And it got us to the farmers markets and the produce stores. We had always shopped, Totino's pizza rolls, mozzarella sticks, all this stuff that came in a box, all hyper processed food. But, here I am, a big, huge guy waving kale across the store at Heather, telling her it's 99 cents. We got to stock up. At one point, we actually, the lady at the cash register asked us how many horses we had. So, but in any event, the first couple days of my juice fast were insanely difficult. But after kind of the hunger subsided, by the 5th day of the juice fast, I woke up in the same position that I had fell asleep in. This was a huge deal because this was all I ever wanted, was to be able to sleep and wake up in the same position I went to bed. So this was huge for me. Little by little, I'm talking like 1 week into this, I start forgetting to take meds. My blood pressure is coming down. I feel better. The constant pulse in my eyes from my blood pressure is going away. My complexion come back. Eczema starts going away. All these really cool things. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, I can't do this the rest of my life. But because I watched Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, Forks Over Knives came up in my queue, and I learned about whole food, plant-based lifestyles. I tell people Forks Over Knives didn't just save my life. It literally gave me a completely new one. I learned that I can just basically, eat what I was juicing along with some grains and starches and legumes. And because of that, I started really getting into the science of things and how this all worked. I was very frustrated that we didn't know more about it. But at the same time, I'm getting all the science, I started hitting me from a common sense approach that all around me, like we put so many pounds of bird seed in the bird feeder, and I never saw a big bird in the backyard that can't fly. I teach aerospace, and I know if that bird gains a 1/2 ounce, it can't fly. And I never saw a bird just kind of waddling around in the backyard. I've never seen a deer that was obese in our woods, and they have 650 acres of corn to eat. Same with fish. I've never seen an obese fish. So this stuff kind of started making common sense. But of course, at 400 pounds, no one ever mentioned what I ate. But as soon as I started going whole food plant-based, everyone's freaking out. And the first thing they tell me is no meat. You have to have meat because, of course, you need protein. And this is one of the other common sense thing, that some of the biggest animals, strongest animals on the planet are plant-based. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I like to unpack this too, because this is much more complicated than just protein. This is amino acids. All the essential amino acids, all the amino acids come actually from the sun and in the form of plants. And we can just cut out the middleman and get rid of all the garbage. But the other thing that was really big for me was dairy, because everyone recognizes dairy as calcium, and we need calcium for strong bones. And then you start hearing these doctors say, well, we're one of the highest consuming dairy nations, but at the same time, we have the highest incidence of osteoporosis. Something is wrong. There should be flags up everywhere. But again, going back to, the common sense kind of thing, you think about it. If I go in my backyard and eat an apple, there's nothing strange about that or peculiar about that. We have 13 apple trees. I love going out in the backyard and eating apples. And I'm back there with no technology, just to what I've been given. But then if I want a glass of milk, it looks much different. We have new neighbors now, but I guarantee they'd call the cops if I went in the backyard to get a drink of milk with no technology or tools. So along with these huge changes in my diet, I also had some huge changes in the way I moved my body. Heather came home one day and she goes, you want to go for a walk? And I was kind of confused. I thought she maybe broke the car or something, but she convinced me to go for this walk. This walk, I was not able to finish. I ended up walking to this rock, which is about 3/4 of a mile away. And I had to sit here and wait for Heather and the kids to go get the car to pick me up. Something inside me wanted to go back and finish that walk. So after I recovered, in about 3 days, I went back and I completed that walk. And that got me really into hiking and being outside. And, 1 mile turned into 2, that turned into 5. And I really started having fun, exploring the woods and stuff. And I would come home and tell my family about these cool things I was finding. And actually, I could start being part of the family again and the activities. Until now, I couldn't even get in the car for more than 20 minutes, or I would get so nauseous from the pain meds, and my knees just couldn't handle being bent for that long. So I really started coming back to my family and having really cool activities. And then my cousin came over one time and he showed me a picture. It wasn't necessarily this picture, but it looked like this. And he said, this is the summit of the Adirondacks, high peaks. And he said, it's something you got to see with your own eyes. So I said, oh, then I would like to climb a mountain next year. So I went to my doctor and I said, Doc, I would like to climb a mountain, so we have to do something about my knees. At this point, I was in immobilizers, which locked my knees like straight-legged. So he sent me to get some braces, custom braces built. They molded my legs and made me some braces. And I went to a school and I just started walking up a couple steps a day. And then 5 steps turned into 10 and 10 into 20. Till a few months later, I was walking up and down stairs for hours, getting prepared to climb this mountain. And this is another one of the dominoes that kind of tipped for me, because in 2012, I summited my first high peak. I was down to 1 brace by now. I was very self-conscious of the brace, so it's behind my other leg. But I made it up here, and I can remember standing up on top of this mountain thinking, I'm supposed to be in a wheelchair and I'm on top of the world. Again, I would come home, tell my family about this. To this day, we spend as much time as we can in the Adirondacks. But what I didn't know was happening at the time, the food I was eating, this anti-inflammatory diet, was driving the inflammation out of my body. And the strength I was building from the activities I was doing, my muscles were taking over where my joints were failing. So this was a perfect recipe to regain my health. I started doing a lot of walking, which turned into I would like to go a little bit faster. So I asked Heather if she wanted to run a 5K with me. We trained super, super hard. And to this day, this is my favorite finish line I've ever crossed. We were so emotional at the end of this race that people thought we actually got some really bad news out on the trail. In the car ride home, I kind of gave Heather a nudge and I'm like, how about a 10K? And she goes, absolutely not. She goes, I almost puked on that. We are not doing 10K. About 2 months later, we were able to cross our first 10K finish line, which was super great. And from there, on the way home, I gave Heather another nudge and I'm like, what about a half marathon? And she goes, you're nuts. I'm out of here. You're alone on this one. And it just so happened that my handicap parking pass was on my dresser and it expired in September, which happened to be the same month that our local half marathon around Niagara Falls was. So I signed up for it. I knew it would be super tough. So I taped a picture of Heather's mom and my dad on there, along with a friend that was struggling with cancer. I put a hole in it and I put it around my waist and I carried it my first 13.1 mile half marathon, which was a really special day. From there, I started getting into marathons. Ultimately, this is where my story kind of hit the news and everything got a little crazy for us. From there, I picked up a bicycle and started riding 100-mile races. And then then all I had left to do was learn how to swim so I could get into triathlon. This was a very special day. I was able to do the Lake Placid 70.3. And people said the whole time you're doing this triathlon, just keep picturing the finish line. And I did, but my finish line was a little different than everyone else's, because about 30 feet on the other side of the finish line was Heather. And I could not remember the last time she didn't have sympathy in her eyes for how I hurt or how sick I was. And I came around the track and I looked in her eyes, and I never saw her so proud. It was an unbelievable day. But in any event, so I have a bunch of awards and medals, and we've been in films and all sorts of stuff. And this stuff is really cool. And this is why people ask me to come share my story. But the reality is, these things aren't as important as some of these. I told you guys about the time I DNF'd on this trail. I couldn't make it any farther past this rock. A few years later, my children will get together on the trail. But instead of coming to pick me up, they were actually my pacers for my first 50-mile ultra marathon. And that was a super special day. I told you guys that Heather would put my socks and shoes on me, and I got to return the favor one day because she was struggling to get her backpack on, and I was able to help her. But this time we were 6,700 feet in the air because we had just climbed Mount Washington together. My choices, both in my past life and in this life, affected a ton of people, not just myself. Heather, since about 2 years after I went plant-based, she went plant-based. She shed about 90 pounds and turned into a pretty competitive runner, which makes me feel super good. But what makes me feel better than that is our life together. We're like 50-year-old kids. Our children get mad because we're never home. We're always doing something crazy. And our life is amazing. You know, it used to just be sitting on the couch. Medically, my triglycerides were 259. In 2009, they went down to 74. My cholesterol was always over 300 on Lipitor. And it's actually down to 102. I gotta update this. It's down to 102 total cholesterol now. This is interesting because we have a healthcare crisis, right? What if everyone could do exactly what I did? 2009, just my pharmaceuticals were almost $20,000 the insurance company paid out. In 2015, 16 combined, they paid about $120, which happened to be B12, which I totally could have got over the counter, but I thought they should have to pay for something. Just imagine that this is repeatable and it's typical. What would happen to the healthcare industry if we could save this kind of money? What we could do, it's amazing to me. So I hope that hearing a brief synopsis of my story, if anything, it gives you hope, because like I say, I did way more things wrong than I did right. But what I did, anyone can do. There's really nothing magical about it. It's just choices. It's just daily choices. It's just focusing on your next plate that's in front of you. So now I have a few minutes. I just want to go over, I guess we'll call it a mini masterclass, the ugly side of addiction. And 2 days ago, I deleted all these slides. So some of these slides are going to be just a surprise to you and me both. So the ugly side of addiction, I guess the first thing I should do is tell you a couple things that I believe. They might necessarily not be true. They might not necessarily be right. But I believe that everyone struggles with addiction in some form or fashion. It might not look like our normal things that we struggle with. It might not look like drugs, alcohol, food, and that type of thing. It might be work, it might be money, it might be a lot of things. But I believe that on some scale, almost everyone will struggle with addiction. I also believe that the effects of addiction can range drastically from person to person. I was blessed with a highly addictive gene, and as was my mother. Now, the one thing that's not so much hereditary, we found out, was my high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and all these things. but I definitely have my mom's addictive personality. I haven't smoked a cigarette in 26 years. I promise you, if I lit one today, I'd be back to 2 packs a day. I know that's how I am. Some people, maybe, I don't know, maybe could smoke one cigarette every day for the rest of their life. I think that we all experience different forms and effects of addiction. I think that there's nothing, and this is sad because I would say every week I get no less than 30 emails about this exact topic. And it's hard for me to be honest with people, but there's nothing that you can say or do to an addict that will put them in recovery unless they are the ones that want to change. This hurts me as a father, it hurts me as a friend, and it hurt my wife while I went through all this stuff. And it's sad, but people say, I just had a lady just email me right before the show. I just got the little preview of it. Her son is over 350 pounds and he won't listen to anything that she says, but she wants me to help. And it's like, I can't help people unless they want help. This is not all negative though, because the good part about this is once someone's in recovery, there's nothing that you can say to them that's going to send them back unless they want to. This is huge. Folks that are struggling with addiction need to get the proper medical help. I am not a medical professional therapist, nor do I play one on Zoom. However, I am an expert in the following. I am an expert at manipulating and rationalizing. I feel like I'm at confession here. I am an expert in manipulating and rationalizing my negative actions and behaviors. This is one of the tall tale signs of addiction. And so we tend to focus on how we manipulate other people. And I was really good at that too. I can manipulate people that I love to do things that they didn't want to do. Just to feed my addiction. And the truth is, the hardest person that I've had to stop manipulating is myself, because I can always rationalize things that I'm going to do wrong. So I'll tell you in 2 seconds why this is important. The other thing I'm an expert in is finding loopholes. I did this as soon as I got used to the plant-based lifestyle. I wanted to find loopholes in it. I can remember going, in fact, I think it was in the McDougall group. And I said something about popcorn. And I'm like, oh, I think I can eat all the popcorn I want. It's a whole grain. And some guy blasted me. And I was so angry because his response was like, anytime I hear all I want, eat all I want, it sends a flag up because you can't. There's something wrong with that logic. So we tend to really want to keep searching for these loopholes and kind of game the system, right? The other thing I'm an expert in is judging and comparing. This works both ways. See, it's a great position for an addict. If you judge forward, you can just say, well, there's somebody that's not as far along as I am, and I'm better than them. Therefore, I can get away with X, Y, Z, or use this for an excuse. The other way, as I can remember early on, watching some of these plant-based doctors, I love Dr. Doug Lyle. He's one of my favorite guys. He's hilarious. I love his artwork. But I can remember walking out. I spoke at Plant Stock and I heard him for the first time. And I walked out of that tent, even as a speaker, thinking to myself, he doesn't know. Like, he's never been 400 pounds. It's easy to get up there and say that stuff, but he's never been 400 pounds. And we tend to get in this place and we can get really good at it. Like, if you're farther along the journey than I am, then you don't understand. You don't understand where I'm coming from. And if you're not as far along, well, I'm better than you. So we can find this place to rationalize anything by judging and comparing to other people. This is your journey. And if you set a commitment to just do better than you did yesterday, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. The other thing is I'm an expert in starting tomorrow. My first tomorrow lasted about 20 years. It's always something's always going to come up. I have a birthday party coming up. It's almost the weekend. It's almost the first of the month. I know I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't know, but tomorrow will never get here. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. All you have is right now. The past is gone. You're not promised tomorrow. You have this second right now to make changes. You don't have to even wait till the morning. Just start now. The other thing is I get stuck in this loop, and I'm really good at this because this is another way to justify and rationalize all my self-sabotaging. I have a failure, right? And then all of a sudden I just have this worthlessness of myself. I start thinking how terrible I am. I knew I couldn't do this. I knew I can't stick with anything. So then I go self-sabotage. It doesn't matter because I can't do anything right anyway. So I start eating, and which causes another failure, and then guilt. And then the whole thing just starts, you start emotional eating and you get into this loop. The good thing about recognizing this, and I'm just being honest with you guys, the good thing about recognizing this is every one of these now for me is a huge red flag. The minute I start feeling like I need to manipulate my thoughts, one of the tall tale signs for me, and this happened when I was really, really into running, is I never lied to my wife. After I was in recovery for drugs and stuff, I learned that anytime I lied to Heather, there was really something bad was going to happen. And since I cleaned my act up, I wasn't lying to people anymore. I wasn't manipulating them. Then one day I was heading to the trail, which I shouldn't have been going out. I was running way too much. And I told Heather I was going somewhere else, and a flag went up, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're lying. And there's got to be a reason why you're lying. So these things, although they're super negative, they can really be a positive thing for you to have a flag come up, a nice caution that you're doing something wrong. And I think it can be super helpful. The cycle thing is a really bad one to get into. So for now, if I feel myself, if I fail at something, I have a bad day, I eat something that's off plan, instead of getting into this worthless mode, I'll purposely right then and there try to go have a win, have a victory, whatever it is. Stop what you're doing, go walk a mile and say, there, you know what? You're back on it. You just walked a mile. Congratulations. You did something positive. So we're all going to screw up, right? We're all going to get to the point where we fail, but it's important not to get in that loop where we just keep sabotaging because we fail. So have a small win. Small wins can knock you right out of that. And I don't want to spend any more time on that, but here are some things that I thought I knew. And so I thought that addicts recover. And when I first got into the plant-based movement, I found Rich Roll's podcast, and he always talked about being in recovery. And I'm like, dude, it's been like 5 years. What do you mean in recovery? And I thought, like, you're done, like you recovered. But the reality is, as much as I hate to say this, because this really bugged me, the truth is addicts are in recovery. And that's huge. That's very huge to know, because we need to keep our guard up, whether it's a food. And I'll just add in here too, personally, food for me has been the hardest thing to stay in recovery. The drugs and the alcohol, easy peasy. I'm done. I would rather die than go back. And there's no little bit of that. But food, I have to eat every day. We have a restaurant. We serve 50,000 meals these past 2 years out of our plant-based restaurant. Now, all our food is really good food. We don't add any oil, but we get cashews in a 50-pound bale. Now, let me tell you something. When I would get cashews in the house, I would go to the store and purposely buy a half of a cup for a recipe. You want to see how much of an addict you are. Buy a 50-pound bale of cashews and set it on the table and just spend some time with it. Like, it's hard. So the idea here is stay in recovery. You're not recovered, right? Stay in recovery. Stay on your guard. Stay alert. The next thing, I thought that the whole food, this might make some people uncomfortable, but I'm just telling you my experience. This is totally subjective. I thought that the whole food plant-based lifestyle would fix everything. But the reality is I kind of had it backwards, right? The whole food, plant-based lifestyle is a tool that can help you live your best life. And, as I've been speaking, doing more courses, doing more coaching, I'm starting to realize that we have this idea backwards sometimes. We think that the whole food plant-based lifestyle is the thing. But really, if we look at it, I did a conference a couple months ago where I said that health is wealth, right? And you invest all this stuff into your health. And if you never spend your wealth and you just save it, it's not much good. So spend this health, live your best life, go on adventures, do things that can only be done when they're fueled by a good, healthy lifestyle. Once you have that, the whole food plant-based lifestyle is now the tool that gets you to where you want to go instead of the place you want to be. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like if you just flip your whole lifestyle upside down and push away the, hamburgers and pizzas and chicken wings so you can munch on some raw broccoli, and you do that so you sit on the couch and watch Netflix every night, I don't know how long you're going to last. But if you're putting poison into your mouth, you're not going to be able to go visit the Grand Canyon and hike down into the gorge. That changes everything. So I think that's a perspective that's super, super important for me. I also thought that battling addiction is the end game, right? But the truth is, living a happy life filled with passion and purpose is the way to stay in recovery. And that it's almost the same attitude I have with the whole food plant-based lifestyle as a tool to my new life. Being in recovery makes a happy life possible. There was nothing I could do. I could get a temporary fake happy from a pill or a drink or a cheeseburger or a chicken wing, but I can never wake up filled with passion, filled with purpose, to help other people find this. And I think that's what keeps you in recovery, because then it's just not a wrestling back and forth. I also thought that a warrior like willpower is critical to crush addiction every day. Although you do have to get up in the morning and realize that there are going to be battles that you have to fight through the day, I now understand that when I know this sounds weird for someone like me, I have a 500-pound deadlift, and I'm going to talk about loving myself right now, because I think this was key from day one. When you learn how to love yourself, you won't have to depend on just willpower. And when you think about it, the people around you that you love, right? You do stuff because you love them. You sacrifice because you love them. You don't have to have willpower to change a dirty diaper at 3 a.m, right? You do that because you love your kid. It's the same with ourselves. When you learn, how important you are and how to love yourself and build that relationship with yourself, you want what's best for yourself. And once you want what's best for yourself, choices become easier. They're not always easy, but they're much easier when you do it from a place of loving yourself and wanting a better life for yourself. So I named this last slide, Tim's Quick Tips for Recovering Plant-Based Addict, but really it should be my biggest mistakes. First of all, the whole food plant-based SOS free is the most optimal way of eating. No one will convince me otherwise, but it does not make you invincible to anything. I'm living that right now. There are certain things, if you get your arm cut off, a whole food plant-based will not grow your arm back. I mention this because I have people that I've worked with and coached that have gone totally away from, whole food plant. For example, this is hypothetical. Someone that's eating plant-based regained health more than losing weight. They regained health. They feel great. And then all of a sudden, a genetic disease or whatever that they had isn't going away. So boom, they automatically say that's not working, and they go on a keto diet or the carnivore diet or whatever. The point to this is life is still going to happen. There's still things that are out of our control. That said, we need to do as much as we can with the choices that we have to eat as the most optimal diet that makes sense. And so my point is, trouble can still happen. That doesn't knock you out of the game. This is your best tool. Whole food, plant-based, SOS free is your best tool to fight just about anything. Low calorie density. This was a hard lesson for me to learn. I still am learning it. A low calorie density is not a license to eat all you want. And I got into this trap, and I'll look at a plate of food. I know I've heard Dr. McDougall say that it's a very, very outlying person that can overeat potatoes. I can. I'm telling you, I won't do it in front of you, but I can eat a 5-pound bag of potatoes, no problem at all. So I overeat, and I'm not eating because I'm hungry. I'm eating just to eat. So just because it's a low calorie dense food does not mean you eat all you want. Eat until you're satiated and get away from the table, which, as a side note, that's also not a license to eat all day. You don't need to eat when you're not hungry. The other thing, there is nothing wrong. And I was the biggest proponent of not counting calories, because if you eat plants, you don't need to count calories. I know there will be some disagreement on this, but if counting calories helps you, count the calories. Again, whole food, plant-based is the easiest way to get low calorie density. But there's nothing wrong with I'm not saying be obsessed with it, but there's nothing wrong with taking a few days and just getting an idea of where your calories, because you'll be surprised if you take a couple sweet potatoes and a couple cups of black beans. That's a lot of calories, and you'll be surprised at how much it is. So I have always told people, don't count calories. If you can count calories, it's okay. It's a good check. It shouldn't be your end all, but it's a really good check if you have to stay on track with counting calories. And lastly, this is huge too. I got caught into this trap, and you can see right behind me how caught up in this trap I was. I thought that goals were everything. I would set one goal, and before I accomplish it, get to the next goal. What I found out, goals are not the important thing. A goal weight is not the important thing. A marathon is not the important thing. The most important thing you can do is build habits. Let yourself run on autopilot. Whatever tools you have to do. I know Chef AJ says if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. Gut your house of anything that can stand in your way and build habits. The habits will last forever if you let them. The goals, if you accomplish them, they're gone. And then what do you do? And where do you stop? Preparation is also hugely essential. I've been at this 10 years, and I can tell you, when I go off plan, it's 100% because I'm not prepared. It's 100% because there's no other way around it. I'm not prepared. So I'm just being real. Goals are great. Goals saved my life. They really did. They saved my life. But as I'm on this path longer, and my 8-minute mile is turned into 20-minute miles, I'm realizing that it's more important for me to get up and go to the front door and open the door than any pace or any distance. It's the habit of going through the motions. Everything else will kind of take care of itself. So with that said, I told you guys this is the ugly side of addiction. I'm going to change it to the beautiful side of addiction recovery. And this is me. And I can tell you, I'm going to do this without getting emotional. If anyone's ever been through fentanyl withdrawals, I don't, it's the closest thing to hell I've ever been in. And I can tell you, I would go through all the shakes, all the withdrawals, all the pain, all the tears, all the rocking in a corner, all the drooling, all the puking, all the fevers. I would do that all over again to just get 1 minute of my new life. To wake up happy and healthy makes everything worth it. So on that, I hope that you guys found some nuggets in here, found something useful, and I hope it helped in some way. You can find me at FatManRants.com. Almost anything. We got some cool stuff going on, but that's for another time.
Wow. What a
There
story.
you go.
What a story. Where's the book? Because I saw the movie. Now I want to read the book.
The hold on, I have to. Okay, so I have 100,000 words. I'm really good at starting. I'm going to sound like a mess here. I'm really good at starting projects and getting really into them and then never finishing them. So I have about 100,000 words written in my, call my real book. We published a cookbook. It was kind of a joke. We were teaching cooking classes. I don't use recipes. Heather said, these people are driving me nuts wanting recipes. So she started, if I'd use a green pepper, she'd put one aside. And then everything I'd use, she'd put aside, she'd write it down. And so we came out with that cookbook. And I never marketed it, never advertised it. And it did like 40,000 copies. I'm like, what? But we made a commitment to give away more than we sold. So a lot of those are down, and you can go on my website and download exactly what went to the publisher for free. So.
Wow. That's incredible.
So the book's coming someday.
Obviously you understand addiction better than just about anybody else, but did you ever think that food was addictive?
No. And what I found out, it's actually the hardest addiction so I actually learned this doing a high school talk for drugs. I looked at statistically what it's like to be on the other side of a fentanyl addiction, and to be 6 years clean and sober is almost impossible. But that is 100 times easier than food addiction. And it's hard for people to understand because it's everywhere. It's everywhere you go. You're just getting bombarded with it. No one ever offers me fentanyl, right? Because I can change my environment. I can change the circle of friends I'm with. I can change everything about I can get up and I can move to another part of the country. I can never get away from food.
I love that. No one ever offers you fentanyl. That is so true. But they offer you cashews.
Sure.
And cashew cream and cashew cookies.
Yes. And we make it in 1.5 gallon batches every day.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love this question from Susanna, because she's listening. She said, when you said you were addicted to getting medals at the beginning of the broadcast, were you kidding? Do you think we can or should change our healthy addictions for healthier ones?
Yeah, so that is a great question. I used to think about that a lot more than I do now. But so, because I actually talked to someone about this that works with addicts, and the definition of addiction is to do something that's harming yourself, right? So I'm not sure running a 5K is harming yourself. I mean, but it becomes, I guess you would call it an addiction. It becomes an addiction to get to the next thing. And that's why through the years, I've learned that goals are really good and goals have their place in your journey, but habits are where everything comes from,
Yeah, absolutely. Sherry says, why do you feel that everyone is addicted in some ways? We've been talking a lot about that this week, Tim, because I was asking Dr. Tarman earlier why so many doctors don't believe in food addiction. And I think it's because they're addicted too.
Well, yeah. So it sounds harsh. I almost didn't want to put that in there, but I think it's true. I mean, I think you can be addicted. There's workaholics. You can be addicted to fancy cars, anything that gets in the way of you living your best life or putting off stuff that you should do. And like I say, it's probably a scale. I mean, maybe there's a Buddhist monk somewhere that's not addicted to anything, but we all are, whether it's Amazon, shopping, TV, we're just getting bombarded with all these, stimuli everywhere. Look at the bottom line is this: society is trying to get you addicted to something. We can call it marketing, we can call it campaigning, we can political, whatever it is. Everyone is trying to get you addicted because they want your attention and then they want more of it.
Absolutely. Val wants to know, do you or did you attend any kind of like AA or Narcanon meetings when you were coming off the drugs?
No, and I should have. And that's why I put in all my talks, like, you need to go get help. I was super blessed. I was super fortunate that I was able to do this. Most people aren't as fortunate as I am. I work in the public sector. I was super embarrassed. I even thought about like going to Canada. But so I had one relapse when my father passed away. But after that, it was like done and done. The fentanyl, I did not quit cold turkey. What I did is every time I will put a new patch on, I cut a little sliver off until there was none
Like
left.
titrated it down kind of percentage wise.
Yes, and then it got to the point where it's not even worth it anymore. And fentanyl was that took months. Fentanyl was very hard.
That's a really, yeah, that I can't imagine, what you went through.
But I think it's the same with our food, right? Like, I think when our lives start becoming full of good stuff, like we crowd the bad stuff out, right? Like, it's because once you start changing your lifestyle over to something positive, you tend to forget about the stuff that's negative. And you can say that with food or anything. I mean, yeah.
Wow. Okay, here is a question from Kathy. Would Tim come on your show and do one of his easy, wonderful dishes? It helps to know you don't have to be a chef or spend forever in the kitchen. I tell you what, Kathy, I'd be willing to have him on the Truth About Weight Loss Summit next year if he'll show us how to make some food. Because actually, we're in the planning stages for 2023, and my partner Toby said we got to get the success story showing the food, because people want to see both. They want to hear how successful you are, but they really want to see what you did to be successful.
Yes, I do. Do you know I can't stand cooking?
What about Heather? Does Heather like cooking?
No, she doesn't. Well, it's funny. I don't really like. I think part of my success early on was I knew how to smoke meats. Like, that was my thing. I didn't really know how to cook, but part of my success was my food was so simple. We just did it. We just developed a program with actually this in mind, to keep it so simple. I went back to what worked for me. And what worked for me was just baked sweet potato cubes. Once in a while, I would have rice and green beans and mushrooms. Like, that was all I used to eat. But it's funny now because somehow we started an educational place locally to teach people in the community for free how to use an Instapot, how to use an air fryer. And through COVID, they shut that down on us. And to pay the lease, I'm like, well, let's make some meals. And so just me and Heather, and I have a full-time job. We put almost 50,000 meals out of our plant-based restaurant. Now we do have staff now. But yeah, I mean, of course, and we could even go to the cafe because all my cooking stuff is there now.
But somebody must be making the food in your family.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. It's just, we make 100 pounds of rice at a time. It's insane. The girls did, they had to cube up 225 pounds of potatoes last week. It's insane. It's insane.
Wow.
But yeah, we could figure something out.
Yeah. Because all this, I mean, I've never even met Heather. I feel I gotta either have her on the show or have her on the summit with you. Vicky wants to know, your diet that you use to lose weight, has it changed from what you're eating now?
Well, probably in a negative way. I mean, so that's another thing that we forget to tell people. When you're 400 pounds, you can eat a lot and get away with it. And then, that last 20 pounds is harder to lose than the whole 200 that you lost. And it comes back a lot easier. But so unfortunately, I do eat differently because I know more options now, which I wish I didn't. So we serve a lot of Butler soy curls at a restaurant. And that's just because it's a product that we can make really fast and really easy. And our goal is not to service plant-based people at our cafe. Our goal is to get, we had two guys, in big Harleys come in. They had no clue that we were plant-based. They had a barbecue soy curl sandwich. They loved it. I don't know what they thought it was. They didn't ask, but that's kind of who we're trying to do, a no oil plant-based food for them. but so like I didn't know about soy curls till like last year. I didn't even know what tofu was. Like I lost most of my weight on really basic like peasant food. And to this day, my favorite dishes are like one of our most popular recipes is the one pot taco. I mean, you just put, veggies and rice with a jar of salsa, lock it up, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I like eating simply. People think it's so boring, but it's cheaper and it takes less time. And if what you're eating you like, it's not,
Right.
it's, you have to like what you're eating, whether it's simple or fancy. But I just love
Yeah.
sweet potatoes. So it works for me. Susanna's making a great point. She says, if Tim doesn't like cooking, then showing us how he keeps it super simple, because there's a lot of people who don't like cooking, can be kind of like cooking for people who hate to cook.
Yeah. So, and that's definitely like, I'm rough. Like when I cook, because I just want to get it done. So I'm kind of embarrassed. Like I see like Brittany all doing all these fancy things. And I'm like, I just dump this in, hit go for 9 minutes on high pressure. Something good will come out. And the worst case scenario, you make soup out of it. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I find that the longer I am doing this, 45 years vegan, not only don't I use recipes, even my own, but like people sometimes get upset. Like on one of my YouTubes, I was like baking something. And I always say, you have to measure when you bake. And I'm like, I got to walk over there and get the spoons and then I have to wash it. And I'm like, I'm just throwing everything in now. And I figure it's going to work. And it pretty much does, if you have good ingredients. So Christy says, Tim, do you still have the EDS diagnosis? I have it. I've been plant-based 7 years and I still need a knee brace.
Yeah. Oh, I certainly have. Oh yeah. I've just been through hell these past 2 years with surgery. I actually almost had my foot amputated. We talked about that. My ankle was so bad. I actually had bone fragments trying to get out of my skin. So I certainly have EDS. My sister has EDS. It's funny. She goes to Yale once in a while where they kind of monitor her. I think she actually got genetic testing and stuff. What's wild is Stanford, someone from Stanford heard my story about plant-based and they did all these tests, like follicle tests and all this stuff. It was really cool. They wanted to know why my symptoms were so muffled. But for people with EDS, inflammation, and not just people with EDS, probably almost every disease you can think of comes from some form of inflammation. And when you're eating processed foods and sugars and oils and meats, these things are all the things that are going to give you inflammation. Now, the difference is if I would roll my ankle, I would be so like it was. There's pictures floating around on the internet of my ankles when they get twisted. They're nuts. Like they're the size of my knee. That used to last for weeks. Now, a couple hours and it goes right away. So the key to EDS and almost any disease is keep inflammation at bay. Pain is another thing. We don't credit food enough for its medicinal purposes. Before I even went plant-based, I started reading stuff like if you had like cherries, like I think it was dried cherries. You have to look it up, but I mean, they compared them to like over-the-counter Motrin, and I'm like, 0 side effects on cherries. Like, what are we doing here? But yeah, herbs too. There's a lot of herbs that can help. We do turmeric, ginger, cayenne, that kind of thing is a good anti-inflammatory.
Nice. Question I can't find. Yes, Mona wants to know, is your restaurant vegan and where is it?
Oh yeah, definitely vegan, definitely whole food, plant-based. We make everything from scratch. It was a real pain in the butt. It's located in Lancaster, New York. It's called Flourish Cafe. Yeah, and it just kind of accidentally happened.
Well, I didn't know this. You're such a top secret kind of guy. We should broadcast from the restaurant sometime.
We could. That's another thing. We were doing cooking shows with schools to get like parental involvement on plant-based cooking. I think one school, 40,000 people had the opportunity to watch. We went through a 6-week program with them, and it was called Cooking Together. And so it was really fun. It's a pain, but it was really fun.
Nice. But Allie says, did you take any plant-based study courses?
Yes. So we did eCornell. I forget the name of it. Yeah, we did the eCornell certificate,
Huh?
but yeah.
Oh, so people, a lot of fans are Kathy and Jill say you do a Facebook Live some Sunday nights and you actually cook.
We do. We try to cook every Sunday night. We've been swamped busy right now, but we're gonna come back. Yeah. So and then we have a membership class that we do a cooking coach thing. So we were doing group coaching, but now people can hop in the membership class. We put out a recipe and then we actually cook it. I think this month is stuffed shells, which is probably the fanciest thing I've ever made. Is tofu stuffed shells with a garden marinade that we make all from scratch. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Jill wants to know, in your area, in your community, are there other people that are either vegan or whole food plant-based?
Yeah. So sadly, we were up to almost we would get the classes and people would retake classes. So I went up to this lady and I'm like, do I suck at this? Like, what? You're taking the same class over, and they just liked being part of a community. So me and Heather sat down. We're like, well, let's make a community. So we rented out a picnic shelter and we said, if we're the only people that sit to our first plant-based potluck, me and her will just have a nice picnic lunch together. And a few people showed up. Actually, someone from Michigan drove 7 or some odd hours to get there. And so that started our plant-based community, which grew to over 350 people. We had crazy plant luck dinners the first Saturday of the month. We did some events. We actually had some really big events where Josh Lajani and the whole Big Change crew came. So we did a couple August events, grew that thing. It was crazy. It was great. And then COVID hit and we're down about 6 people. Like, I don't know where everyone went.
Oh my gosh.
So it was super sad.
Have you ever heard that expression? I think it's from AA, that when you're getting sober, your addiction is in the corner doing push-ups.
Yeah, in fact, I just heard that. I think you posted that.
Yeah. The reason I'm wondering, do you ever worry like, oh my God, I could wake up 400 pounds tomorrow?
I don't think I worry about that. I mean, I'm probably 20 pounds heavier than when I was ultra running like 60, 70 miles a week. But no. I mean, I used to pretend there was a fat guy chasing me. But I guess I don't worry. I don't worry about that.
That's good. That's good. Do you find that if you do go off plan, either a little or a lot, it's a little harder to sometimes get back on?
Oh, 100%. We're dealing with that now. Because a lot of the fitness I was doing, a lot of the activity I was doing. So I DNF'd, but I just competed at Ironman Lake Placid 13 months after an ankle fusion. I just wanted to see if I could do it. That involved since January. And I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm going to make a point. Since January, I've ridden my bike over 3,000 miles, and I don't play when I ride. Like, I'm riding, 19, 18 miles an hour. Like, I'm going hard. I've swam over 100,000 yards in the pool or lakes, and I've ran over 500 miles. I still have trouble running. And when you do that, there were times I go for a 6-hour bike ride. I could easily burn 2,500 calories, no problem. And I'm not like faking it. Like, I have watt meters. I have all this data. Like, I have computers everywhere while I'm riding. Like, it's legit. Which really, really can cushion what you do. So all this time I was really physically active. You're burning sometimes 2,000 calories a workout over the week. That adds up to, like, you can eat whatever you want until you can't, right? And then once you have to undo that, it's like, it sends you into a whirl. And rice is my thing. Like I could sit down and eat 6 cups of rice. I'm not even kidding. Like, I can literally sit down and eat 6 cups of brown rice with nothing on it. And I enjoy it.
Yeah, I love plain rice. I usually eat about 2 or 3, but wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting how so many people I know that's like you and Rich Roll, and even Josh Lajani, that, struggled with addiction or excess weight. Like, the exercise becomes almost addictive, like, in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. David Clark used to talk about, he passed away, but he used to talk a lot about that. And like, I know it was always this debate. I don't know. Is it another addiction? I don't know.
If it is, it's a much healthier one. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I'm learning now, like it's been 2 years since that addiction was a thing. I mean, I trained very different for this than I used to. I wouldn't come home all beat up, you know?
The only thing I worry is if you like when you can't exercise.
Yeah, well, I couldn't for about 2 years.
Right.
I mean, between my back, I mean, I was laid right out on my back with drains. Like it was bad. I was hooked to pumps and stuff for 2 years.
How did you keep your, because you seem like a really positive person. How did you keep that going during those 2 years? Or did you?
You know, you know what? I was super proud of myself. Even I was scared because at first there was talk about ALS, and that scared the crap out of me. They kept I think for 2 weeks I was in the dark. They were taking like x-rays in the back of my mouth and stuff, like, because I had a lot of the symptoms. Like I couldn't even, we had to get rid of all the throw rugs in the house because I couldn't even lift my toe up over a rug. I mean, I went from running 25, 30-mile trail races to I can't get up a step. I need help. My whole, like one morning I got up, I reached up in the air and my legs just stopped working. But my spine was almost pinched right off. But once I got through that, I'm like, I guess I just learned that do the best you can with the tools that you have. And sometimes that's going to be running. And sometimes, you know, it's whatever. Like there's always areas that we can better ourselves in. And sometimes we got to change it up. And I'm grateful that I got to change it up. I learned so much. I spent so much time in the pool. I started my coaching up. I was able to do a lot more digital stuff than I had. So I put together courses because I was teaching online from home anyways. So, I mean, some of my courses are in 8 different languages. They've been, I forget how many countries. It's insane, you know? And I would have been able to do none of that if I would have just kept grinding, running and stuff.
And are you still doing your regular teaching job?
Yes, I go back next week.
Oh my God. Do your students know your story, or are you just Mr.
Oh, yeah.
Them?
Yeah. So what's wild about that is, so every student, I work for a very big school district. Every student that goes through our school hears my story. They watch Forks Over Knives in health class. And that takes, I think, about 3 days. The 4th day, I come in and do a talk on plant-based lifestyle. And then a few months later, they do a unit on addiction. And then I come back and do another talk. So I have stacks of like letters from kids and stuff. So it's super cool. So the district will actually get a sub for me so I can go be a health teacher. So every kid in my school, and there's thousands, will hear my story. And then they start moving me around to do like graduation, you know, motivational talks. So it's fun. Yeah. And my kids, I don't know. They appreciate it, I guess. Maybe. I don't know.
Oh. You're just so inspiring. Where's the best way for people to connect with you? Is it Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, I'm not real crazy. I don't know. I got to get my act together with social media. But so we probably do the most on my FatManRants Facebook page. That's probably where they're most active. I'm actually most active on my private page, which, but yeah, anything FatManRants. If you go to my website, there's the free book is there. Lately, so my blog started out as all plant-based stuff, and slowly over time, I started talking about, you know, addiction stuff and some of the experiences I've had, like what you said about how do you stay positive, you know, when the chips are down. So I write a lot about that too.
That's as important as anything, I think, other than, you know, just the food.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm on my list. I'm starting a podcast. It'll be very different. It won't necessarily be a plant-based podcast, but it's called Excuse Smashers. And I'm really fascinated with people that make the most out of a not so great situation. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Jessica Krant, who practices in Manhattan, is watching and said the program at your school is amazing.
Yes, I'm super fortunate to be a part of that. So it does get tiring, because when I think about because I have to do 6 40-minute sessions almost back to back, and I do that 3 days in a row, and it's the same exact presentation.
Well, you must be pretty good at it now.
Yeah, which is, it's not, sometimes I feel guilty because I can almost do it with my eyes closed, but and I do that twice a year. So it's a lot. It's hundreds and hundreds of presentations.
Were you always so comfortable doing presentations and public speaking? Because I guess if you're a teacher, you're always in front of people.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, you are just so inspiring and so likable. I wish New York wasn't like literally as far away from California as you can be. Hey,
Yeah.
Colleen says you must be such an inspiration to all the students. Have any of them changed their habits because of you?
Yes, and that's super fun. So yeah, and it's great. So probably more. So some of the kids knew me at the 400 pounds, like they knew me then. Because I lost weight really fast. When I went plant-based, like if a student was a freshman or 10th grade, by the time they graduated, I had lost half of my body weight. So it was a big deal. And that's when the news was coming to the school and everything. But now, even so, they know how I eat. Half of them will hop on our lives and heckle me on our Facebook lives, but it's super cool. But yeah, so I can think of a couple kids that really like trimmed out, just, and they're plant-based. They're 100% plant-based,
That's amazing. Well, Tim, thank you so much. It's so great connecting with you, honestly.
Yeah, I appreciate
have to watch it again, everybody. Well, you're very good, the wonderful slides, and I love it the way you did the spin on the dark side of addiction and then to the bright side of recovery.
Yes, and I did that about 30 seconds before we got done. So,
well, you did good. And Maria says it's amazing what you've overcome. Thanks for doing the presentation and changing lives.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest hope is that people realize it doesn't have to be this big thing. It's just your next plate. It's just your next choice.
Eat an apple.
That's it. It's just that next thing. People get so overwhelmed about, well, what about this? And hundreds and hundreds. The cool thing about this, the same process is used to lose 200 pounds or just get healthy and not lose any pounds. It's the same process.
Right. We don't do one diet for recovering from addiction or with diabetes.
Right.
We're all eating the same. Justin says it's your next choice. Absolutely. Well, Tim, this has just been wonderful spending this afternoon with you.
Yes. And you're supposed to ask me what I ate today.
You're right. Guys, let's wake up, you people. No, it's true. Almost every guest, even when I have a guest like that talks about something that has nothing to do with nutrition, they go, what does Tim eat in a day? So it's got to be simple.
So I tried to watch some of these. We've been so busy this week because we had a couple events. And so I just popped into one of the end of one of your lives and I heard you say that. So I was prepared. So today I ate super weird. I had a banana in the morning. And then I had about 3 heads of romaine and I had some jasmine rice on them with salsa. I shredded up the romaine, put some salsa, a little hot sauce on it, and then some jasmine rice. And I stirred that all up and with red pepper. I like very spicy food with red pepper. And it was a great lunch. And now they're closing the shop. So we eat a lot of leftovers. It will likely be lentils. I like lentils and we make a scratch made barbecue sauce that's delicious. So
I love salsa too. What's your favorite color salsa?
Well, I like green, but most of the time we just get red.
It's funny because I like green too. Tomatillo is one of my favorites. Yeah. Oh, wow. 2 peas in a pod. Well, I hope you get to meet you in person one day.
Someday we will. I'm sure we'll bump into each other.
Now the question comes, what do you eat in a day? You already told us. All right. Thanks so much, Tim. This is
okay. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time for the final day of Food Addiction Recovery Week.